almost didn't go. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I almost called my mother that Sunday morning and said we weren't coming. My son Marcus had a little cough, nothing serious, just enough that I thought, maybe we skip this one. But he asked me. He looked up at me with those big brown eyes, still in his pajamas, hair sticking up on one side, and he said, "Mama, are we going to Grandma's today? I want to see the cousins." And I said yes. I said yes because he was 7 years old, and he loved his grandmother's house. He loved the smell of it, that mix of cinnamon and old wood and something faintly floral that I've never been able to name. He loved the backyard with the old tire swing. He loved running through the hallway and sliding in his socks on the kitchen tile. He loved it the way children love places that feel like magic. And he didn't know yet that some magic is an illusion. We arrived around noon. My sister Diane was already there, of course. Diane was always already there. Her car, the white SUV my mother helped her buy 2 years ago, was parked right in the driveway, crooked as always, taking up just enough space that I had to park on the street. I noticed it. I always noticed it. But I didn't say anything. I never said anything. Marcus jumped out of the car before I even turned off the engine. "Slow down," I called after him. But he was already at the door, knocking, bouncing on his heels, that gap-toothed smile stretched wide across his face. My mother opened the door. She looked at Marcus, then looked past him at me walking up the path. "You're late," she said. I looked at my phone. 12:04. I smiled. "Sorry, Mom." That was how it always started. And inside, the house was warm and loud. Diane's 3 kids, Tyler, who was 9, Chloe, who was 8, and baby Reese, who had just turned 5, were already spread across the living room like they owned it, which, in many ways, they did. Tyler was on the big couch with the remote. Chloe was coloring at the coffee table. Little Reese was eating crackers and watching something on my mother's iPad. Marcus stood in the doorway to the living room and waved. "Hey, guys." Tyler glanced up, then back at the TV. Chloe didn't look up at all. Reese waved, at least. Reese was always sweet. I watched my son's smile flicker, just for a second, before he walked in and sat on the small chair in the corner. Not the couch, not the spot next to Tyler. The chair in the corner. He knew his place. Even at 7, he already knew his place. My mother's kitchen smelled like heaven that day. She'd made a full Sunday spread, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with bacon, and a peach cobbler sitting on the counter like a centerpiece. The cobbler had a golden crust, and it smelled so good it almost made me forget every complicated feeling I'd ever had about this house. Almost. Diane was at the kitchen table, nursing a glass of sweet tea, watching my mother work and offering commentary. "Mama, you should have added more butter to those potatoes." "Mama, is the chicken done? Poke it again." "Mama, Tyler doesn't like green beans, remember?" My mother nodded and adjusted and stirred. She never told Diane to hush. She never told Diane anything except yes. I offered to help. I set the table, refilled the tea pitcher, sliced the bread. And my mother accepted the help without acknowledging it, which was also how it always went. Lunch was loud and crowded and fine, the way family meals are when you decide to let things go for the sake of the afternoon. The kids ate, the adults talked. Tyler knocked over his juice and my mother cleaned it up without a word of frustration. Marcus spilled a small bit of his milk, and my mother looked at him with a look I can't fully describe. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something quieter and colder than anger. "Be careful," she said to Marcus. Just to Marcus. I handed him a napkin and we cleaned it up and I moved on. I moved on because that's what you do. That's what I had always done. After lunch, the kids were restless. My mother started clearing the table and the cousins disappeared. Tyler back to the TV, Chloe outside to the yard, Reese down for a nap in the back bedroom that had always been referred to, without explanation, as the kids' room. Marcus asked me if he could go outside. "Go ahead, baby. Stay in the yard." I started washing dishes at the sink, while my mother packed up leftovers and Diane sat at the table scrolling through her phone. We fell into the rhythm of the kitchen, that quiet that comes after a big meal, and I let myself relax a little. That was my mistake. About 15 minutes later, I heard my mother's voice from the hallway, sharp and short. "Marcus, come here." I turned off the water. I heard footsteps, small ones. "That mess in the hallway, clean it up." I dried my hands and walked toward the hall, and that's when I saw it. Marcus was on his knees. He was on his knees on the kitchen tile, a rag in his small hands, scrubbing at a smear of mud that had tracked in from outside. His sneakers were by the door. He'd taken them off like I always taught him, so the mud wasn't from him. I knew from the size of it, from the pattern of it, that it was from Tyler's boots. Tyler, who never took his shoes off at the door. Tyler, who my mother had never once asked to take his shoes off at the door. But it was my son on his knees, and from the living room, I could hear Tyler and Chloe laughing at whatever was on TV, unbothered, untouched, just laughing. Marcus scrubbed. His little knuckles were red. He didn't cry. He didn't complain. And he just scrubbed because his grandmother had told him to, and he was 7 years old, and that's what you do when an adult tells you to do something. I stood there for a moment. Just a moment. And something inside me went very, very still. I didn't yell. I want to be clear about that. Everything in me wanted to. There was a heat that rose up from somewhere deep, from my stomach, from my chest, from some part of me that had been storing things for years, and it pushed up into my throat like a wave. But I didn't let it break. Because I'd learned something over the years. I'd learned that yelling in my mother's house only ever made me look like the problem. It made me look unstable. It gave Diane something to text about for weeks. It gave my mother the opportunity to look wounded and confused, to say, "I don't know why she gets like this," and to have everyone nod along. I didn't yell. I walked to Marcus calmly, and I crouched down beside him. "Hey," I said quietly. "Give me that." He handed me the rag. And he looked up at me with an expression I didn't know how to carry. This small, uncertain look, like he wasn't sure if he'd done something wrong by needing to be rescued. Like being helped was something he had to apologize for. I helped him up off the floor. I took his reddened hands in mine and looked at them. 7 years old. His knuckles were red from scrubbing. My mother was in the kitchen 10 feet away. "Mama," I said. Not loudly, just clearly. She appeared in the doorway. "He doesn't clean floors," I said. She blinked. "There was a mess." "He didn't make the mess." She tilted her head, that particular way she had, like she was patiently explaining something to someone who was being difficult. "I asked him to help. Children help. Diane's kids aren't helping." The air shifted. I felt it. She felt it. "That's different," she said. And there it was. That's different. I nodded slowly. I took Marcus's hand. I walked him to the bathroom, ran warm water over his hands, dried them gently. He was very quiet. He had that look children get when they're absorbing something they don't have language for yet, something their body understands before their mind does. "Are you okay?" I asked him. He thought about it for a second, the way he always did when he was being honest. "I don't think Grandma likes me as much," he said. 7 years old, and he had already figured it out. I kept my voice steady. "You didn't do anything wrong. None of this is about you." He nodded, but his eyes were somewhere else. I went back into the kitchen. My mother was at the counter, cutting the peach cobbler into portions. She had already given Diane a large slice. Tyler had a plate. Chloe had a plate. Little Reese would have one when she woke up. She had not cut a piece for Marcus. I watched her for a moment. She didn't look up. "Where's Marcus's piece?" I asked. "I'll cut it in a minute," she said, "when there's more room." There was room. There was an entire cobbler on the counter. There were 4 clean plates stacked right next to her hand, but there was no peace for my son. I thought about the mud in the hallway. I thought about Tyler's boots, still on his feet on the living room carpet. I thought about the look on Marcus's face. I don't think Grandma likes me as much. I thought about how he had said it not with drama, not with tears, but with that quiet, settled certainty that comes when a child has already run through the evidence and reached a conclusion. And then something older moved through me, something I'd put away a long time ago. A memory. I was 9 years old. I was in the same kitchen. My grandmother, my father's mother, not my mother, was visiting for the summer, and she had made my mother's life a living, quiet misery for 3 weeks. She had a way of excluding my mother from conversations, of speaking past her, of directing comments to my father, to my aunts, to anyone else in the room, of making my mother feel like a guest in her own home. And I had watched. 9 years old, and I had watched it all, confused by the shape of it. I didn't have words for what I was seeing. I just knew that my mother moved differently when Grandma was there. Smaller, tighter, like she was taking up less space on purpose. One Sunday, there was a peach cobbler, different kitchen, different house, same cobbler nearly, same golden crust, same smell. Grandma served everyone, my aunts, my father, my cousins, me, my brother. Last, almost as an afterthought, she handed my mother a small sliver, a fraction of what everyone else had. My mother said thank you. She sat down, and she ate that sliver of cobbler, and she said thank you, and she never once looked up. I had thought about that moment many times over the years. I had thought about how my mother must have felt. I had carried sympathy for her, a bone-deep sympathy that I had assumed meant I understood her, that I understood exclusion, that I would never be the one handing someone a sliver. But standing in her kitchen 30 years later, watching her arrange cobbler plates with no peace for my son, I understood something different. She hadn't learned from that table. She had learned from that table what it felt like to be on the outside. And somewhere along the way, and she had decided that the lesson wasn't, don't do this to others. The lesson she had carried forward was that there are insiders and outsiders, and she would make sure she was never the outsider again. And Marcus, my son, with his gap-toothed smile and his sock sliding and his love of her cinnamon and wood-smelling house, Marcus was the outsider. I don't know when it started. I've turned it over and over, and I still can't find the exact moment. Maybe it was because his father and I had separated, and his father was someone my mother had never approved of. Maybe it was something about the way Marcus was, quieter than Tyler, more sensitive, less loud with his affection. Maybe it was just that Diane had always been the favorite, and Diane's children inherited that status automatically, the way wealth passes down. Whatever the reason, the result was standing in front of me, my son, red knuckles, no cobbler, already knowing. I went back to the living room. Marcus was sitting in his corner chair again, quietly drawing in the small notebook he always carried with him. He drew constantly, animals mostly, elaborate, careful animals with big, expressive eyes. I sat down next to him on the arm of the chair and looked at what he was drawing. A dog, fluffy, oversized paws, a big, lopsided smile. "That's great, buddy," I said. He kept his eyes on the page. "Mama?" "Yeah?" "Why did Tyler get to watch TV and I had to clean?" I breathed slowly. "Because Grandma made a mistake, and I should have said something sooner." He thought about that. He added a small flower next to the dog, careful, deliberate petals. "At lunch," he said, Tyler dropped his cup and Grandma said, "Oh, it's okay, sweetie." And then I spilled my milk and she said, "Be careful." And he didn't say it like a complaint. He said it like he was reading from a list, like he had taken notes. I noticed that, I said. She calls Tyler and Chloe sweetie, he said. She doesn't call me sweetie. What does she call you? He drew another petal, very carefully. Boy, he said. I felt it land somewhere in my chest. I felt it settle there like a stone. Boy, not Marcus, not sweetheart, not baby, not his name. Boy. How long has she been calling you that? I asked. He shrugged one shoulder. Always, I think. I sat with that for a long time. Long enough for the afternoon light to shift. Long enough for Diane to come in from the kitchen with a piece of cobbler, no plate for Marcus, and settle onto the couch and start watching something on her phone. Long enough for Tyler to fall asleep on the cushions and Chloe to drift back inside, cheeks pink from the sun. Long enough for my mother to appear in the doorway with a single small piece of cobbler in her hand, extended toward Marcus, almost as an afterthought. Here, she said, for you. Marcus looked at it, then looked at me. I gave him a small nod. He took it. Thank you, Grandma. She went back to the kitchen. Marcus held the plate in his lap. He looked at the cobbler. He didn't eat it for a long time. He just looked at it. Then quietly, almost to himself, if there's food left. I turned to him. What? That's what she said last time. If there's food left, Marcus can have some. He said it without mimicry, without venom, just a clean recollection. She said it to Auntie Diane. She didn't know I heard. I handed him my piece of cobbler. I wasn't hungry anymore. That night, after I got Marcus bathed and into bed, I sat at my kitchen table for a very long time. I am not a person who acts in anger. I've worked hard on that. I grew up in a house where anger was a weather system, unpredictable, sweeping, damaging, and I decided young that I would be different, that I would be the calm in the room, that I would think before I moved. So I sat at my table and I thought. I thought about the mud and the rag and the red knuckles. I thought about if there's food left. I thought about boy. I thought about my 9-year-old self watching my mother eat a sliver of cobbler and say thank you. And I thought about the fact that I had been watching the pattern for years, the slight, the exclusion, the invisible boundary that placed Marcus outside the circle of warmth, and I had been managing it, minimizing it, telling myself it wasn't that serious, telling myself it was just generational, just a personality clash, just the way family was complicated. I had been protecting my mother from accountability, and in doing so, I had been failing my son. I opened my laptop. I looked up the number for Child Protective Services. Not because I believed my mother was dangerous in the classic sense, there were no bruises, no deprivation, but because what I had witnessed was a child being emotionally singled out, assigned labor, denied food, and called not by his name, but by a pronoun. By an adult who was supposed to love him unconditionally. I knew the system. I worked in social services, not directly in CPS, but adjacent enough to understand both its limitations and its power. I knew that a report didn't mean a removal. It meant a look, and a trained eye, an outside perspective that I, as his mother, and as someone tangled in the family history, could not provide. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a long time. I thought about what my mother would say. I thought about Diane's texts, the ones that would come, rapid fire, furious. I thought about being labeled dramatic, vengeful, unstable. I thought about the way family systems protect themselves, the way the person who names a problem is always treated as the problem. And then I thought about Marcus. Holding that plate, eyes on the cobbler, if there's food left. I typed the report. I was as specific as I could be. Dates, words, incidents. Not just this Sunday, but the pattern, the things I had filed away and not acted on. The birthday party 2 years ago where Marcus had been left out of the gift-giving game. At the Christmas where his stocking had less than half of what Tyler's had. The steady, quiet architecture of being made to feel like a visitor in a place that was supposed to be home. I submitted it just after 11 o'clock at night. Then I closed the laptop, turned off the light, and went to check on my son. He was asleep with his notebook open on the pillow beside him, the dog drawing, staring up at the ceiling, big lopsided smile, careful petals. I pulled his blanket up. I kissed his forehead. "You are the whole point," I whispered. "You are the whole point of everything." The next 3 days were quiet. Not peaceful quiet, the other kind. The kind that has a hum under it, like the silence before a storm when the birds stop. I didn't call my mother. She called me Tuesday afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message in that particular tone of hers, warm on the surface, something harder underneath. "Just calling to check in. Marcus left his jacket here. Let me know when you want to come pick it up." Diane texted me twice. Both times just, "You good?" I didn't respond. I went to work. I made Marcus's lunches. I helped him with his reading homework every night. He had a good week at school, got a sticker on his spelling test, came home excited about a book his teacher had read to the class. And I watched him being himself, curious and careful and quietly funny. And I felt something sharp every time I thought about the way my mother looked through him. Wednesday evening, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I let it ring, then checked the voicemail. It was brief and professional. A name, a title, a request to call back to follow up on a recently filed report. I called back immediately. The conversation was calm and thorough. The investigator asked me to recount what I had witnessed. She asked if my son had ever expressed feeling unsafe. I told her what Marcus had said. The boy, the cobbler, the cleaning. I told her about the pattern. She asked if I was willing to bring Marcus in for a brief, voluntary conversation. I said yes. Thursday morning, I was making Marcus's breakfast, scrambled eggs, the kind with cheese that he liked, when my phone rang. Different number this time. The investigator again. Brief, professional. "We're making a home visit to your mother's residence this morning. I'm calling as a courtesy because you're the child's primary parent. You don't need to be present, but I wanted you to be informed." I thanked her. I set the phone down. I finished making the eggs. I sat across from my son at the breakfast table and watched him eat. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time in relation to my family. The particular relief of having stopped performing. Of having told the truth to someone whose job it was to see it clearly. Marcus looked up. "Mama, you're not eating." "I know, just thinking." "About what?" "About how proud of you I am." He made a face like he wasn't sure what he'd done to earn it, but he smiled anyway. That gap-toothed smile. "For what?" he asked. "Just for being you," I said. "Just for that." My mother called me at 10:47 that morning. I was at my desk at work. The call came in and I watched the screen for a moment. Her name there, the little photo I'd taken of her 2 summers ago at the beach, smiling, sun in her hair. I answered. "There is a woman at my door," she said. Her voice was controlled, but I knew the edges of it, the stiffness that meant she was frightened. "I know," I said. A long pause. "You called them?" Not a question. "Yes." Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. "You brought a stranger to my house over a spill and some cleaning? You did this to me? Over nothing?" And there it was. Already over nothing. I thought about Marcus's knuckles. I thought about Boy. I thought about that small sliver of cobbler, handed over like an afterthought, like something to be grateful for. It wasn't nothing, I said. You've embarrassed me in my own home, in front of my neighbors. Do you understand that? A CPS worker at my door. Mom. Just her title. No sharpness to it. She stopped. You made my son scrub floors while the other children ate. You called him boy. You served food to every other child in that room first, and he sat in the corner chair because he knows that's where he belongs in your house. That's not nothing. That's a pattern, and I should have named it a long time ago. The silence that followed was different from the previous ones. He's a child, I said. He's 7 years old and he loves you, which is the part that makes this hurt. He came to your house wanting to slide in his socks and smell your cinnamon smell and see the cousins, and you put a rag in his hands and called him boy. Nothing from the other end. When that investigator is done talking to you, I said, I want you to think about something. I want you to think about a 9-year-old girl watching her mother eat a sliver of cobbler and say thank you, because you raised me to see that, and I saw it, and I thought you knew how much it hurt. I heard her breath change. I'm not doing this to hurt you, I said. I'm doing this because the only job I have that matters is making sure that boy, my son, with his name, his actual name, Marcus, knows he is loved completely, not conditionally, not what's left after everyone else has been served, completely. I let that sit. The investigator will explain what comes next, I said. I hope you'll listen. And I hung up. 2 days later, my mother came to my house. I wasn't surprised. She had sent 3 texts and left 2 voicemails. I had responded to none of them. This was the inevitable conclusion. She was a woman who could not sit with unresolved conflict. She needed to close the loop on her own terms. She knocked and I answered the door. She looked older than usual, or maybe I was seeing her differently. She was dressed carefully, the way she always dressed when she was bracing for something. Her good cardigan, pearl earrings, hair done, armor. Can I come in? She asked. I stood back to let her in. She came into the living room and stood, looking around. Marcus was at school. It was quiet. She noticed the drawing on the fridge. Marcus's dog, the one with the lopsided smile and the careful petals. And I'd framed it in one of those cheap magnetic frames. It was the only thing on the fridge. She looked at it for a moment, then looked at me. I want to talk, she said. Okay. You had no right to, Mom. Gentle, but immovable. Before you tell me what I had no right to do, I want you to hear something. She stopped. Marcus told me you call him boy. I kept my voice even. He told me he's always known he isn't your sweetie. He told me, at 7 years old, that he doesn't think you like him as much. He said it the way a child says something they've known for a long time. Not crying, not angry, just knowing. Her face shifted. He still drew you a picture, I said. Last week after we got home, he sat at the table and he drew you a picture. He asked me if we could mail it to you, because he loves you. In spite of everything, he loves you, and that is the part that breaks my heart. Her jaw was tight. He loves you, I said again, and you call him boy. I never meant. It doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what he felt, and what he felt was less than. It matters that when there was mud on the floor, you didn't call Tyler, whose boots made the mud, you called Marcus. It matters that when you served the cobbler, his plate was last. It matters that his stocking at Christmas, that was different. How? I asked. Tell me how, because I have been asking myself that for years, and I cannot find an answer that makes sense. So tell me how it's different. She didn't answer. You humiliated my son. In your house, in front of the cousins who laughed, in front of the kitchen that's supposed to smell like love. I let out a slow breath. That's why I called. Not to embarrass you, not out of revenge, because someone needed to look at it clearly, and I had been too close to it for too long. She sat down on my couch, which surprised me. She sat down heavily, her hands in her lap, and for a moment she just looked at the floor. I don't think I realized, she said finally. I know, I said. That's also the problem. I sat down across from her. I didn't soften what I was about to say, but I didn't sharpen it either. I just said it clean. I am not asking you to love Marcus the same way you love your own daughter. I am asking you to treat him with basic decency, to use his name, to include him in the food, to not put a rag in his hands while the other children watch TV. Those are not high standards, Mom. Those are the floor. She nodded slowly, once, twice. The investigator, she said. She was very thorough. I know. She'll be checking in, said flatly, neither complaint nor acceptance. I know that too. She looked up at me. Are you keeping him away from me? I thought about it honestly. That depends on you. It depends on what changes. Marcus loves you. He would walk through that door tomorrow with his notebook under his arm, ready to show you his drawings if I told him it was okay. But I am only going to tell him it's okay when I believe it. And right now, I don't. She absorbed that. What do I need to do? She asked. Start with his name, I said. Just his name. Every single time. Marcus came home from school that afternoon with paint on his elbow and a permission slip for a field trip and a story about a caterpillar he'd found at recess. We made a little house for it, he told me, pulling off his backpack. Out of a cup. Ms. Rivera helped. We're gonna see if it turns into a butterfly. That's amazing, I said. It might take weeks, he said, very seriously. Butterflies take a really long time. Worth waiting for, I said. He dropped his bag by the door and went to the kitchen for a snack, the normal afternoon rhythm of him. Crackers and apple slices. He sat at the table and opened his notebook and started drawing without being asked, the way he always did, just naturally, the way breathing was natural. I sat across from him. Marcus, I said. I talked to Grandma today. He stopped drawing, and he looked at me carefully. Is she okay? He asked. 7 years old. First question about whether she was okay. She's fine, I said. She has some things she needs to think about. But I wanted to ask you something. Okay. When you're ready, not now, not soon, just when you're ready. Would you want to see her again? You don't have to. It's your choice. Completely. He thought about it. He picked up his pencil and turned it over in his fingers, end to end. Does she know my name? He asked. The question was so precise it stopped me. Yes, I said. She knows your name. Does she know it's Marcus, not just boy? Yes, baby, she knows. He turned the pencil over one more time. Maybe in a little while, he said. Can I finish my drawing first? Take all the time you need. He went back to the page. And a new animal this time. I leaned over to look. A butterfly. Of course. Wide-winged and careful, with those big expressive eyes. He was drawing it emerging from the cup. Little paper cup, carefully rendered, and the butterfly rising out of it, slow, deliberate, wings just beginning to open. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. A lot of people, when they hear a story like this, want to know if things got better. They want the clean resolution, the grandmother who changed overnight, the family dinners that became warm and equal, the past erased and replaced with something whole. They want the butterfly to have emerged fully, wings spread, story over. I want to be honest with you. It's slower than that. My mother is making effort, real effort. I can see it when I watch her, which is something I do now without apology. I watch. She uses his name. She speaks to him directly. The last time we visited, she asked him what he was drawing and sat with him for 20 minutes while he explained the whole elaborate world of his animals. She called him Marcus, twice, unprompted, and both times he looked up at her with an expression that nearly took my knees out. And it wasn't everything, but it was something, and something is where all things start. The CPS case was closed after the follow-up investigation found no immediate safety risk, which I had expected. I had not filed the report to remove him from her home. I had filed it because I needed someone with authority and training to stand in that kitchen and see what I had been too tangled up in to name clearly. That purpose was served. Diane doesn't speak to me right now. She texts occasionally, one-word messages, cold and formal. I've made peace with that. Or I'm making peace with it. It's still in progress. What is not in progress, what is settled, finished, decided, is this. My son knows his name. He knows it in his body the way children know things that are true. He says it easily, Marcus, like it fits him perfectly, which it does. And he knows it means something. He knows it is what people who love him call him. He eats first, not last, not when there's food left, not as an afterthought. First, or at the same time, like every other child at every other table deserves to eat. He does not clean floors that other children dirtied. He sits on the couch. He slides in his socks down the hallway, and I don't call after him to slow down anymore, because I want him to feel exactly what he feels right now. The full speed of his own joy, unchecked, unearned, undeserved in the sense that some things are simply given. He is 7 years old. He draws butterflies and dogs and animals with big expressive eyes. He found a caterpillar at recess and made it a little house. He is extraordinary and ordinary and completely mine. And I will spend every day of my life making sure that he knows, not suspects, not hopes, not wonders about in the quiet of his corner chair, but knows, in his bones, in his name, in the way food appears on his plate before anyone asks. He belongs. He has always belonged. He is not a guest. He is not a leftover. He is not boy. He is Marcus, and he is the whole point.